SLU International Business Now, Conversations That Matter, is a podcast developed by the Boeing Institute of International Business in St. Louis University's Chaffetz School of Business. Special thanks to founder Dr. Sung Kim for his grant to support the launch of this podcast.
Welcome to this new episode of St. Louis University's Boeing Institute of International Business. I'm your host, Jennifer Mackey, Director of Sustainability at Bunzl, bringing you conversations that matter. Bunzl appreciates the opportunity to sponsor today's podcast. Bunzl North America is a custom distribution company helping customers in the grocery, food service, safety, food processor, and retail segments to run their businesses safely with consumable packaging and personal protective equipment. With over 8,000 employees, people are the power of Bunzl. Today, we're going to discuss how two St. Louis-based companies in the packaging value chain enable customers to respond to consumer interest in more sustainable packaging. My guest is Carol O'Neill, Group President of Packaging at Barry-Wehmiller Companies. Before joining Barry-Wehmiller in 2013, Carol held key leadership positions in two packaging companies, Spartec and Sealed Air, and championed the development of sustainability strategy at each of those businesses. Carol, thanks for joining us today.
I'm really happy to be here. As you know, Jennifer, sustainability is near and dear to my heart. So I really welcome the opportunity to share some learnings and perspectives I've gained over the years.
Before we start talking about our topic today, would you please tell our audience about Barry-Wehmiller and what it does?
Sure. Barry-Wehmiller is today about a $3 billion privately held company that was founded right here in St. Louis in 1885. Although it was founded primarily as a producer of equipment for the brewing industry, we've grown into a diverse company with 12,000 team members and businesses all around the world. Most of our businesses either manufacture complex equipment or provide expert consulting services. As a leader of the packaging business, I'm responsible for the businesses that provide equipment used to package and label everything from food and beverages to household and personal care items, pharmaceuticals, and medical devices.
Thanks for grounding that with us. Let's talk sustainability. Sustainability is one of those very broad terms and has different meanings to different people, such as individuals, companies, societies. So today we're going to focus on companies' abilities to impact change on the natural environment, from the way we design our products to how we operate our businesses. So both of our companies play a key role in the packaging value chain, yet we're not interacting directly with the consumers. So we're able to work with our customers to help them make informed decisions about single-use packaging. So as a packaging equipment provider, how is Barry-Wehmiller Packaging uniquely positioned to help customers?
Well, Barry-Wehmiller plays a critical role in the supply chain for our customers. Our customers tend to be large and small brand owners that package kind of pretty much everything you'd find in a grocery store, or if you no longer go to grocery stores because of COVID, everything that shows up in your house in an Amazon package. So our customers are trying to run their businesses more sustainably and to provide more sustainable packagings for the consumers. And they really rely upon us to provide the equipment that will enable them to do that, which means they want us to provide equipment that's efficient to operate, that minimizes waste in their production process, and that provides them the ability to package products in more sustainable packaging. So what that means is we need to design equipment that will effectively fill and close packages and label packages, of course, made with thinner and thinner materials, and to produce equipment that's extremely flexible. Because as materials and packaging companies come up with new solutions that are more sustainable, our customers need to be able to run those materials on our equipment, even if our equipment was installed before those new materials were invented. So our role and our responsibility and kind of our opportunity in this whole process is partnering with the materials companies to know what's coming, really understanding what our customers' needs are, and then designing equipment that's not just energy efficient, which is kind of a small piece of the solution in terms of our role, but really that's adaptable, flexible, and or can be easily modified to meet new packaging solutions as kind of the world comes up with solutions that are more and more sustainable.
That's really interesting because we're two different types of companies in this packaging value chain, but I see one key theme is that we both have flexibility built into our operating models. And that's huge for us. So one of the things we work on is helping to support our customers with their sustainability goals. So classic sustainability goals for large grocery chains, food service companies, retailers, they're looking for their sustainable packaging to be recyclable, compostable, or reusable. Some of them go an additional step and are looking for packaging that includes renewable or recycled content in it as well.
I think the fact is like sustainability and what's a sustainable product is a super complicated sort of question, so like what you're describing, customers are they have their sustainability goals. You're distributing products to them. They want you to give them a product that's going to help them meet their goals. But I think in some cases, what's a sustainable product is a really complicated sort of question because, there isn't a silver bullet best solution for everything. I mean, in general, like what a package is used for, what packaging is used for. First and foremost, obviously, packaging has to preserve the freshness and the quality or whatever of what's in it, right? So you have to have, it has a certain performance characteristic that it has to do. Packaging has a job to do. Yes, it's presenting the product on the store shelf, but it's also packaging and preserving what's inside it. So, it needs to have moisture barriers and oxygen barriers and light barriers in some case to protect what's in it. And that's those are sort of table stakes. You have to have packaging that does that. Then when you get to the sustainability question, it really comes down to, what I would say is kind of inputs and outputs. And I know when we worked together years ago, I used to draw this picture on the board that's kind of, inputs and outputs. Inputs being what is a package made from? That's what the inputs are. And then how well a job does it do when it's being used? And at the end of its life, when that package is being disposed of, like what are the options? What are the different places that happens with that product at the end of its life? So, and that's where you talk about recycled content. Well, that helps the input side of the question. Or made from renewable resources. That, again, it helps the input side of the equation. And then you talk about recyclability or compostability. Well, that's at the end of life outputs part of the equation. And people sometimes get very confused about packaging. I mean, the sort of nirvana product, the best product would be something made from a renewable resource, something that grows every year, corn or biomass or something. That's if a package was made from something that was infinitely available, very expensive, didn't take a lot of energy or water to create, that would be like the world's best input. And then if you could compost in your backyard, that's the world's best output. But there aren't too many packages in the world that are made from a renewable resource, can be composted in the backyard and provide the water, the moisture, oxygen, and light barrier needed to preserve, your soup on the store shelf for 2 years. Like that product doesn't exist. So that's the interesting thing about sustainability is that we're all working towards finding something that's like better than what was out there before, or, better on one dimension, better on two dimensions, but it's an evolving practice to figure out like what's the right solution. And you're facing that as a distributor. The good thing for you is you don't manufacture the stuff. So presumably when someone invents a better mousetrap, you can put it in your portfolio of solutions that you bring to your customers.
That's the flexibility that we're able to offer. We have no manufacturing footprint, so we're able to be super flexible with the types of materials we use in our packaging. We're not tied to any sort of manufacturing process either. We're able to work with some of our supplier partners to create these innovative new products and get those out on the market. And with our size and scale and our relationship with those key supplier partners, we're able to bring solutions to the market that are affordable. That's very important with sustainable packaging and with sustainable products in general.
Yeah, I mean, for us, because we do have we are kind of much closer to our customers' manufacturing processes, and they do have, a footprint and an installed base. So what we're typically working on with our customers, since that Nirvana package I described does not exist, is figuring out kind of what's the best step or steps they can take to move from wherever they are towards a more sustainable solution. So sometimes that means redesigning the product itself. So you're reducing the size of the package. And therefore, in reducing the size of the package, you're reducing how much packaging is used. And you're improving the number of packages you can get on a truck, and therefore reducing all of the energy costs associated with that packaging. So, I know you've seen the shrinking of the size of the laundry detergent container, moving to concentrates was all about sustainability. Less water in the package, therefore a smaller size package, therefore more packages on the truck. That's a radical redesign of the product and the package, very much motivated towards sustainability and cost. Sometimes it means just down-gauging. I say just, it's not so easy, but down-gauging whatever is the material of choice historically. So, you've seen that in water bottles that seem to get thinner and thinner, and the caps on the water bottles that seem to get tinier and tinier, or the metal cans where you've gotten thinner and thinner, right? So it's just a question of use less material in the package. And sometimes you can even continue to fill and seal and cap those machines, those cans or those bottles on the same machines you had before with a certain amount of modification. Sometimes, as you mentioned, it means incorporating more recycled content in the package. Sometimes it means making packages out of materials that are more readily recycled. So, a paper bottle, an aluminum can, or PET versus polystyrene. So there's all kinds of options like that where you can, where there's steps you can take towards a more sustainable solution.
Right. And you've been mentioning all sorts of different sustainability attributes throughout some of these examples. One thing that we've worked with is creating a tool that's a marketing claim guidance tool for sustainable attributes.
Right.
Quite often it's a trade-off, which is what you've been talking about. So we want to make sure that all of those attributes that we are listing on our packages are credible, that when our customers take those packages, they realize that there will be no industry backlash for using that sort of packaging. And one thing I feel strongly about is that our suppliers' marketing claims are not necessarily our marketing claims. So we run each of those packages against of our marketing claim standards before we present those to customers.
I think that's one of the things that makes people a little bit cynical about sustainability is they feel like there is a lot of sort of greenwashing of in terms of the way people present their products. And there's also just a tremendous amount of confusion in people's minds about what is recyclable, what is the meaning of that little recycling symbol on a piece of plastic. If it has that little symbol on it, does it mean it's, and people are very confused. And there are some people, some providers of different types of packaging that take advantage of that. So I think it is important for you all to do what you're doing in terms of trying to create some sort of an objective standard. If you're really helping your customers, you want to give them advice towards something that's more that's truly credible, or at least you've kind of put a stake in the ground and said we're gonna have some understanding of the substance behind something before we just take someone's claim that it's biodegradable. So I think that's really commendable.
And biodegradable is one of those key areas of risk. You see it all over the place, but what does it mean? Everything biodegrades if you give it 1,000 years.
Right.
So when we're working with our customers, we recommend certified compostable packaging in those instances. It defines the length of time it takes for the package to go back to basic elements and the environment in which it needs to be to break down to those basic elements.
Yeah. That's, I think, really one of those key things. And there are some people who are really excited about these biodegradable plastics, like a PLA product or something where you say, okay, it's made from corn. That sounds good. It's readily renewable and it's quote unquote compostable at the end of its life, but it is compostable. And if you're in Denmark or another country where there's a very robust industrial composting network, then a PLA product might have all those attributes we're looking for. Good on the input side because it's made from a renewable resource. Good on the output side because it's compostable. But it's compostable in an industrial composting environment. And so, you have to know the context in which people are working. What are the output options? What are the end of life options? Whether it's recyclability or compost or industrial composting, like what is available in that market helps decide what is a best solution for that particular environment. So those are all important attributes.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that you mentioned earlier was the fact that you can't just design a product on its own. You really need to look at the context, the application for the product, the infrastructure in local communities, and legislation. For instance, a couple of weeks ago, we were working with a customer on the West Coast. We were looking at 4 different states where this customer, a large grocery customer, sells product. Within those 4 states, there were over 200 pieces of legislation that banned different types of packaging, and none of them are the same.
Right.
It just adds to the complexity. And so we're working with our sales team and teaching them how to track legislation in your territories, because there's legislation at federal level, state levels, county levels, city levels. And so we need to arm them with tools when they're working with customers and looking at all of our options for packaging. Another situation is just the infrastructure. So we try to arm them as well with infrastructure that's in different communities. And when we put together a marketing campaign, let's say on compostable items, we want to make sure that we're targeting those geographic areas that have that infrastructure in place.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, that's part of what you're doing when you're trying to be a solution provider to your customer. Part of what's helpful to them is if you've figured out how to navigate this landscape already. I'm sure that Bunzl, like Barry-Wehmiller, has large companies as customers and maybe some smaller companies as well. And so large companies, the Nestle's, Unilever's, Danone's, Lego, they have armies of people who understand the legislation in the universe in which they operate. And I'm sure some of your larger grocery retailers do as well. But smaller companies, they really value a supplier who understands this complicated landscape and that they operate in. Our ability as a customer to understand our customer's landscape and help them find the right solution. They trust us if they know we know what's the political landscape, what's the recycling landscape, like what is understanding their context and then bringing them a solution that's right for their context. They come to trust us as being that kind of supplier who knows that. So it is super important that you all are doing what you're doing, because that's how you are a solution provider and not just an equipment provider or not just a distributor. Like, you're really bringing your customers a solution to help them navigate something that is incredibly complicated and it's changing all the time. I know one of the things that we've worked on is there's several of our customers in the yogurt packaging industry are trying to move from using, most yogurt cups are made out of polystyrene. It's very well suited to a form, fill, seal packaging, which is a very efficient, very low waste, very high hygiene, really in many ways a very low carbon footprint, very sustainable package. What goes in at the beginning is a roll of film and a roll of plastic, and what comes out at the end is, a fully formed cup, which means, so it's a very environmental, from a carbon footprint supply chain perspective, it's one of the most environmentally friendly packaging you can come up with. But polystyrene is not very frequently recycled. It can be recycled. It's just not generally recycled. And so as customers want to move from polystyrene and they come to us and look for alternatives, figuring out for that customer what's the right alternative is not so straightforward. Kind of going back to your question about context. In some, you could say, well, let's move from polystyrene, which is a petroleum-derived plastic, to PLA, which is a corn-derived plastic. It's a bioplastic. And you can make a form, fill, seal yogurt cup out of PLA, or you can make it out of polystyrene. But in some markets, in some geographies, in some political climates, PLA is a very attractive solution because of its, bio-based properties. But in others, for whatever reason, the environment or the politics, they don't like using a food product like corn to be made into plastic. And so those companies say, well, I want to go from polystyrene to PET because both are oil-derived, petroleum-derived plastics, but one is not readily recycled and one is highly recycled. So what is the right evolution when we're going from polystyrene and you want to become, quote unquote, more sustainable? It depends. It really depends.
It really does depend. Yep. So for instance, we're just even in regions like the Pacific Northwest, in the Seattle area, compostable solutions are encouraged. Mm-hmm. But if you go down south to Portland, they don't have infrastructure to support composting, and they're not interested in it necessarily. So we focus on alternative materials when we're in Portland.
Well, I'm sure it's the same when you go to another country. Like I think you were mentioning to me once, like Canada, I don't remember, but I think they sort of frown on bioplastics. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. So, where a PLA based, compostable, industrially compostable solution might be attractive in Portland or Seattle, it might not be attractive, just, over the border. So, and how do our customers navigate that? Like that's part of what we need to do as a solution provider, as a partner, is bring some of that expertise to help them make the right decision about what their packaging solution should be.
So we've been in this industry a number of years, and it seems like sustainability is really accelerated.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it is. I think I can remember 20 years ago being in the packaging industry and having, even then I said, we need to have, I was at Sealed Air and we said, we need to have a sustainable packaging strategy. We make packaging and we make it out of plastic. And, we got really, really smart R&D people. We probably need to have some of them focusing their attention on how we create a more sustainable packaging solution that provides the same attributes, but maybe made from different raw materials or maybe with different end of life solutions. And I remember then people said, it's a fad. Like, this wood's been around forever. It'll come, it'll go. And I remember saying then, maybe it's a fad, but wouldn't we want to be part of making it not a fad? Like, wouldn't we want to be part of coming up with a solution that was a viable solution, so it didn't have to be a fad? And so I feel like now today, sustainability is here to stay. It is not a fad. The world has become a lot more aware of humans' impact on our environment. And I think we will be, and frankly, I think we should be challenged to use our creativity and our innovation capabilities to work in a way that conserves our precious resources and that minimizes our impact on the world in which we live. So I think you're right. I think it is accelerating, or it'll go up and down in awareness. It'll go up and down in priorities. I feel like it was becoming a very, very high focus before COVID, and people were, very even discouraging single-use packaging of any sort. Like using water bottles was like a really bad idea in the world for a while. And then we had a pandemic and we wanted everything in a unitized container. So, there will be ebbs and flows and like different popular views of what's good and what's bad. But I think the drive to have more sustainable solutions in terms of packaging is for sure here to stay.
And as an international company, are you seeing a lot more pressure for sustainable solutions in, let's say, Europe versus other parts of the world?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think what we've seen for many years is that, and for reasons I'm not sure I fully understand, maybe because in general, Europe tends to be more quick to legislate things from a kind of government directive perspective than we are. But there have been European requirements for sustainability and for producer responsibility taxes and those kinds of things that really created an economic model for a brand owner, a producer of any type of product, to really think about and frankly be responsible for the end of life impacts of its packaging and its products. And so I think we'd certainly see in Europe a much greater level of attention and focus and frankly, cost benefit. The cost of having a non-sustainable packaging solution for a European company tends to be much higher than it is for a US based company. But most of these companies are selling around the world. So any US based company selling into Europe has to pay attention to those requirements that are happening in Europe. But you definitely see a lot of companies in Europe and to a lesser extent in the United States, but big global companies making bold statements about their sustainability goals, commitments to having, 100% of their products either renewable or recyclable by, X date. And so you see that in companies like the Danone or Nestle or even Lego. Lego is a customer of ours, and they make bricks, obviously, that all of our kids love, made out of plastic. And that's great because those are not single use. But the packaging has always been in plastic. And they've said, well, we don't want the packaging, the bag that a kid rips open to dump we want that to be in something else. So you see a lot of companies around the world really moving to get into more sustainable solutions. And some are driven by legislation Some are driven by, I think, their consumers. Some are driven by their investors. I mean, I'm sure working for a publicly traded company, there are investor groups that have made sustainability a strategy. And so they're challenging companies. And, all of these are just, I think our kids, even like my kids in their 20s, the young adults, they're not satisfied with the pace at which we're becoming more sustainable, and they're advocating more loudly. And I think this will continue.
Right. Yeah, certainly our investors are interested in sustainability and all of our ESG efforts.
Yep.
And so we've conducted a materiality assessment in the last year that looked at our key stakeholders, investors, customers, suppliers, and tried to understand what they think we should be focusing on. And so we've captured all of that data. And some of the top areas of interest for them are sustainable products. That was number one, climate change, and human rights. So we definitely take that into account and integrate that into our sustainability strategy.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. As a privately held company, we don't have that same level of insights on our investors' priorities, but I think it's a good discipline you guys have gone through to really understand that and take a pulse on kind of what the priorities are of your stakeholders. So for sure, our team members care, and they care about our ability to innovate equipment that is able to meet our customers' sustainability goals. So I know within our organization, we have across our different divisions that provide a whole bunch of equipment for a bunch of different types of packaging solutions, whether it's flexible packaging, like bags of lettuce, or, rigid packaging, cans of carbonated beverages, or yogurt tubs or bottles of juice. We have such a wide range of solutions, but throughout our organization, especially the younger engineers, are really excited about using their creativity to find more sustainable solutions and to make equipment that's really very well suited to helping our customers meet their needs.
Yeah, that's one wonderful thing about sustainability is that you can really embed it in any functional role within the organization. Yeah. And I think the younger generation is just going to push that through and do the research and integrate that into their roles and make a difference. Yeah.
And I just think as a leader in a business, any kind of business these days, one of the things that we need to do is figure out, and it's a challenge, frankly, is to figure out, how do we build the organizational competency to really be that terrific partner, leader, thought leader, innovator in this area of sustainability. For me, that's a multifaceted, challenge because, we need the expertise because it's complex, because it's technical, because it relates to performance specifications. You really need people on your team who have the expertise and the knowledge and the different solutions. You need to have, strong industry relations with those other partners because people are buying equipment to fill a package, and that you have to be innovating. As I mentioned before, we have to be closely aligned with the people who are innovating new materials and packaging solutions. So we're designing our equipment to work well with those. So it's kind of you have to be kind of networked with the right players in the industry, which is pretty important. And then, as you said, you really do have to embed it in your processes. You need to embed, as my teams across all of the world in all of our 28 manufacturing facilities are innovating and designing new solutions. They need to test a range of materials on them, test water soluble films, test PLA films, test PET and polypropylene and polystyrene and paper and coated papers. And, that just needs to become part of our normal processes. Like when I'm designing a piece of equipment, I need to think about all the materials that a customer might ever want to run on it, all the different ways I might want to seal it, and frankly, all the different ways I might want to be able to modify or upgrade it, because it might be that the best mousetrap hasn't been invented yet, the best material hasn't been invented yet, and I don't want to sell my customers a piece of equipment that's obsolete in 2 years. So it's a real challenge to embed in your organization that mindset, especially when you have such a large and far-flung one. And then you need to train your team. And I think you've done a bit of that yourself in your organization. Train your sales teams to know how to listen to what the customer's needs are and help be that guide to the customer so they know what they're doing. So it really is a systemic change in the organization that you need to embed. And I think it's that's what we as leaders in organizations of the future need to be able to do. We need to be able to build that competence and kind of business practices and disciplines into every piece of our organization. So that we have the ability to be that partner our customers need.
One of the ways that we have integrated sustainability into our business is with a Sustainability Ambassadors program. We've trained 30 different people in different functional roles, from sales, category management, procurement, marketing, just to understand sustainability, learn about the products, all the sustainability attributes, but also learning about those different factors, the environmental factors, the market conditions, the infrastructure, and the legislation. So we look at all of our projects in a very holistic way. Mm-hmm. So there is a real need for sustainability in the market. Our customers are asking for it. It's not going away anytime soon. Yet sometimes it feels like the progress is hindered. What do you think about that?
I think it fundamentally, obviously, it boils down to some extent to economics. People want more sustainable packaging solutions, but they don't want them at any price. Fundamentally, when we come up, that problem that we're solving for, when we're trying to come up with the ideal package, yes, it has to provide the functionality that they need first and foremost. It has to protect and preserve the contents. We want it to be made out of sustainable input. We want it to either be recycled or composted at the end of its life, but we also need it to be cost effective. If gold was the ideal sustainable packaging solution, no one would use it to package yogurt. The fact of the matter is it has to be economically feasible. And when we talked about it, when we talked about these different regions and the different uptake in sort of more sustainable solutions in different regions, part of what makes them more popular in a place like Europe is because the government tax and regulatory scheme, it changes the economics, right? It makes it worthwhile to spend more on a package if it has a better end of life sort of picture or profile, and therefore the producer will pay less in terms of end of life taxes. But certainly economics, I think, plays a pretty big role to play. I'll tell just a quick story. I used to work at a company that we made packaging, and we had a customer who sold a very, very, very popular product that had 8 or 9 billion units of packages sold per year and growing super rapidly. And that customer said, if you can make this cup for me, this little pod in polypropylene, I'll buy it, 8 billion a year. The sky's the limit. And so we ran off to the races and spent over $1 million trying to develop this package in a polypropylene form, because it was quote unquote it was a more environmental solution than the one they were using previously. And they had assumed that because polypropylene was a little bit less expensive, it would also be less expensive because of the things we had to do in the manufacturing process to make polypropylene an appropriate solution for this. The product cost, between 5 and 7% more than what they were using before, at which point they wanted nothing to do with it. So, it was a hard lesson to learn. It was a very expensive lesson to learn, but it was a real lesson, right? Yes, companies want a sustainable solution, but companies also really care about the economics of their business. And as you know, having a lot of grocery customers in your portfolio of customers, it's not a high margin business. So a few pennies here, a few pennies there on some of these products, and it definitely makes a difference in terms of their bottom line. So, it's part of what makes our jobs interesting, I think, is that, the landscape is changing. We're constantly on the search for that best solution, and that best solution has to be good for the environment, good for the functionality, and fundamentally good for the bottom line. So it's a continuing quest.
Right. It does make life interesting.
Yep.
No doubt.
Yep. Well, I've really enjoyed talking to you about this today. And Jennifer, I just love what you're doing at Bunzl, and your role to be able to focus on sustainability is very cool. So it's been really enjoyable to reconnect and also to talk about a subject that I think is fascinating and is changing. And it's kind of a a challenge for all of us. So it's great to get a chance to talk about it. And I hope we'll get to do it again.
Thanks so much, Carol, for all of your insights today. It's been very helpful and useful, and I'm sure our audience will get a lot out of it. It's been great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the SLU International Business Now Conversations That Matter podcast. We invite you to subscribe to this podcast series so you don't miss any future episodes. To learn more about the Executive Master of International Business program, please visit biib.slu.edu. Again, that's biib.slu.edu.